Now, where do we get the idea that anybody would be better off if he was changed? If we see everybody in a state of disability and super agreement with criminality and in a beautiful state of in turbulence, where we have a society that teaches people if you were a genius, you were crazy. How do you make a genius? Well, you drive somebody crazy, obviously. That's what it adds up to, doesn't it? We get this sort of a situation where everybody's idea of everybody else becomes himself. Well, let's look at that. See, here's Mr. A, famous Mr. A, very famous fellow, almost famous as Pat Pending. Mr. A is certain that everybody around him is very evil, and that they are going to get him one way or the other. Now, Mr. A has no choice if he is also saddled with super agreement, obsessive agreement, making equality a necessity, but to be this way himself. Now we ask this question, does this evil character actually exist? That's one of the first things we have to ask in clearing. Does this evil character exist? It seems like we have a synthetic personality in existence, which isn't really anybody, but is simply everybody's idea of how bad the other fellow is. This is pretty complicated, see? He's got the idea that this other fellow is so bad that he cannot help but criticize him violently, but because he is equal to this fellow over here, then of course he himself has to assume these characteristics of superlative evil. You see that? We get generals, admirals, politicians, all sorts of people who have an idea that the enemy is so bad, or that the fellow man is so bad, or something else is so bad, they can't possibly live with it, and have therefore got to cut it to pieces. It's a very tricky thing. This has a vast bearing on clearing. They've got to cut this evil being to pieces. Yes, but at the same time, they have an equality complex. By communicating with him, they therefore go into agreement with these evil characteristics, and the only thing they have left is an evil synthetic personality which they themselves have to wear to be like everybody else and to be normal. This is one of the simplest and easiest tricks that is played in culture. So what are you trying to do when you're clearing people? You've got to find the fellow himself, and you also, as you go up the line, not an attribute of clear, but an attribute of OT, have to give him a certainty on the other fellow. Now, unfortunately, an auditor is senior to a clear because he already has to have an idea of what the other fellow is really like. Once he takes a scoop shovel and unburdens this personality that this fellow thinks he has to wear. So if everybody in a whole society was wearing a secondary, synthetic, useless, you know, some people aren't even imaginative enough to be evil. It's quite remarkable. Takes a little imagination. He's wearing this coat, you might say, that was never anybody, and he says is everybody. And all you have to do is get him to take off his coat. Relax and be himself. How do you do that? The auditor, let's say he's dead in his head, case in terrible condition, sits there, picks up all the somatics of pre-clear, goes to bed at night and says, you know, he had a cognition. I wonder if that isn't what's wrong with me. He has to have some kind of an idea of the other fellow that the other fellow's all right. Well, this is quite remarkable. And in the process of auditing him, he sometimes gets re-stimulated to the point where he says, maybe this fellow isn't quite that all right. Maybe I ought to keep him dead down and pat him in the face with a shovel. Because maybe he is, maybe we're wrong about this. The odd part of it is that a person who has cleared somebody clears people. Isn't that interesting? It's very easy. All you have to do in order to clear people is just clear somebody, and then you'll be able to clear people. Is there anything wrong with that? Yes, it's clearing the first one. Therefore, a major breakthrough took place when somebody else cleared somebody than myself. That was an immediate major breakthrough, because it showed other people that other people could do it and gave them a considerable confidence. Now, auditors have to learn individually, each and every one of them, that they can do it. Then they'll just go on doing it. It becomes very simple once you've done it. Well, trying to build up a bridge to the point of where somebody would clear the first one without much confidence, without much real concept of what the other fellow was really like, that was the trick, and that's what we've done in these 8 years. It's taken 8 years to do that. And I apologize because that's a very long period of time. 8 years, a great many things have happened in these 8 years. But I'll point out to you that it can't be too long a period of time, because all during this period of time, we've mostly had just one president in the United States. As if we had one. I think at the beginning of this era, I don't think very much was added to the various sciences. I think they came out and made public the hydrogen bomb, and that was just a little more effective and efficient way of killing more people faster, which I think is the basic goal of all science. That's at least the basic goal of government. War is that condition where you can kill the mostest with the leastest, the fastest. Therefore, the end goal of all war is the depopulation of Earth. So therefore, we get the end product of any government which has an impulse toward war as having no people. If you want to go over that logic again slowly, you'll find out it's quite sound. So therefore, the basic activities of a government must consist of getting rid of people. Well, now that's not our activity. We are not interested in getting rid of people. We're interested in getting rid of synthetic people. You ever see one of these? Of course, you have these APA graphs, these nice 8.5 by 11 sheets with graphs, and it shows a blue line and so on. People have begun to build up a mystic quality concerning this graph. They believe this graph is something very difficult. Well, they have to believe that, because sometimes when they see their own, they say, look, I'm not that bad. And do you know that it's perfectly true? They are not that bad. Do you know what that graph says? That graph says, this is what we call a valence. This is a synthetic personality. This is this man's belief of other men, worn by himself. And when it creeps along the bottom,